This is an absolutely fascinating speaker. We're delighted has agreed to come and speak at Megalithomania. She is well known for being the organizer of the Goddess Conference, also the founder of the Goddess Temple here in Glastonbury. She's written many acclaimed books on various aspects of the goddess and of Avalon and other subjects. She's a teacher, a ceremonialist, a healer, a writer, and much, much more. So we're delighted to welcome today Kathy Jones. Thank you.
I'm going to be talking to you about temples of the goddess from ancient times to the present day. One of my life purposes is to bring goddess alive in the world again. And one of the ways in which we do that is by understanding how she has existed in the past, has been known in the past, and is present now. But we're going to be looking to the past. So I'm just going to begin with a kind of definition of what is a goddess temple. So a goddess temple is a place on her earthly body that feels naturally sacred because of its location, its position within a wider landscape, its contours, beauty, and surrounding nature. It is a contained and sacred space, boundaried by land, trees, the ocean, rivers, hills, valleys, trees, plants, earth, wood, stone, bricks, walls, and space. It is a place where the energy of goddess arises and can be felt by all who enter, whether they are aware of her or not. A goddess temple is a sacred space created by people and set aside for the worship, honor, and celebration of goddess in one or more of her many forms. A temple is a numinous space where goddess energy can be strongly felt, which is enhanced by the repetition of our prayers, spoken in devotion to her through ceremony, celebration, healing, music, art, poetry, and drama. It is a sacred home for all goddess-loving people, where we can meet each other and share our love for her. It is a sacred center at the heart of our communities, for the living and for the dead. It is a holy sanctuary where priestesses and priests of goddess can express our love for her, creating transformative ceremonies in her name, offering teachings about her, creating goddess culture, gifting healing in her name. And finally, a goddess temple is a sacred center for the expression of new Mother World values and practices. Mother World is the society that places Mother Earth, mothers, and all carers, and the values of mothering, love, nurture, and support for all peoples, all creatures, all of her nature in the center of our lives and communities. We begin by looking to see the shapes of goddess in the landscape. Here we have the mountains in Kyrgyzstan forming the shape of a woman lying on the earth. The paps of Anu, of the mother of all goddesses, in Killarney. And the painting of Anu by Jane Brightson. The shapes of her body evoke her presence. We see her and we feel her. This is the entrance to the Karikian Cave, which is a creation cave on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, which has been there for thousands of years. It's high above Delphi in Greece. Sacred offerings were found in this cave from 4000 BCE. When we enter the cave, this is also called the Cave of the Nymphae and the Muses, and this is a view from the inside looking up the slopes towards the entrance. So long before the oracle at Delphi existed, this was an oracling cave above Delphi. And in the walls of the cave, there are many shapes naturally arising from the movement of rock and water. And as you spend time within the cave, you can see the shapes of beings arising out of the walls of the cave, including the goddesses and gods of the Greek pantheon. This is an origin cave, and many caves in ancient times were recognized as places of origin from which life emerged, from within which mythologies emerged, stories, beliefs, divinities, and beings. This is one such cave dating from 176,000 BCE, where it's believed that Neanderthals arranged their bones and rocks in certain sacred circular enclosures. 37,300 BCE, in El Castillo in Spain, on the walls of the caves are the handprints of the ancestors. And throughout time and over thousands of years, these handprints become evocative of the people who entered the caves, who painted in the caves, and who connected not only to their own divinity, but also to the Mother Earth, she who was to be found, usually deep within the furthest recesses of a cave. 32,000 BCE, we have the cave, the Chauvet cave from France, in which were found these amazing paintings and engravings of all kinds of animals. In the deepest recesses of the cave, at the end of the cave, we come and find this shape here, which is on the eye level is a dependent rock falling down. On this cave is a pubic triangle. Her legs, the legs of the goddess, and often goddess is represented by a pubic triangle throughout many, many cave paintings. On the left is a lion, on the right is a bison, and together these form her body, which hangs down here. On the rocks behind, this dependent rock is here, and on the walls are many, many of the lions, of the buffalo, of the cows, of all the creatures which were in nature at that time. Once again, handprints of the ancestors to be found in the Chauvet caves. And what is interesting to note is that many of these handprints are small, and they are hands of women and children. And perhaps more than 50% of the paintings were done by women and children. 25,000 BCE, we have the Venus of Losel, which is found on a rock shelter, on the wall of a rock shelter. She is one of the earliest depictions. She's not very big. She's actually about this size. When I first saw pictures of her, I thought she was huge, but she's this size. And also in that cave are other depictions of goddess. Now, one of the ways that we know that these are goddess and not women is that very often there is no definition on the faces. They do not have faces. Their legs taper to nothingness. There are no feet. There is often a bulbous body, big breast, big belly, big thighs, big hips, a symbol of abundance, of the abundance of life. And these images of goddess, which are found for many thousands of years in many different cultures all over the world, these images are all naked. They do not wear clothes. They're not women. They are the abundant mother. This Venus of Losel, she holds in her hand a buffalo horn that has the 13 markings. It's believed to be the first acknowledgement of the 13 cycles of the moon. Once again, handprints of the ancestors in the Altamira caves in Spain from 18,000 BCE. Over long lengths of time, there is evidence, if we look for it, that the people honored and worshipped both nature and goddess. Here, the Lascaux caves, the famous ones that everybody has seen pictures of. Again, the beauty of her nature, the availability of her animals, the lives that people lived in their relationship to animals. And often the animals are painted on caves that are very deep in the earth. They're not painted on the exteriors there. You have to journey down into the underworld in order to see these creatures painted that obviously had great significance for the peoples of those times. And these, they are found throughout France, Spain, Portugal, many places in Europe. It was quite common. In our own lands, we have some cave drawings just down the road near Cheddar, and we have some in the north. This is a simplified form of Göbekli Tepe from 10,000 BCE. These, as someone is going to be talking to you, I believe, in the next couple of days about Göbekli Tepe, I'll just move through these because these are, it's an amazing site which is on the top of a hill. And they've only dug like 5% of Göbekli Tepe, and the stones are carved. This one, which is, you can see the hand marks, so the tallest T-shaped stones represented great beings. In the center of each oval, there are two really tall stones that usually have a kind of, that they were a special and overlooking beings, and everything else around them is much smaller in the oval shapes of these spaces. Wonderful carvings of the creatures that lived in those times are carved onto the T-shaped stones. And also, from 10,000 BCE, we have this figurine on the left of a Sheila. A Sheila is an image of goddess which we find throughout our lands and through Ireland and Britain, but was actually also here and also in Australia. It's a very common image of an old woman with her legs spread apart, her vulva displayed, her breasts are old, her arms are thin, her head. She speaks of ancient wisdom. Now, when this is, you can see this image in a museum in Saint-Lurfa, which is just near to Göbekli Tepe. But when she was, and again, she's about this big, she was found on one of the sides of one of the oval enclosures. When they found her, the archaeologists, the Turkish archaeologists, put her face down underneath a shed because they didn't want people to see her, because she had attributes that they felt were unholy. And Lydia Rule, who was an amazing goddess artist and creator of many goddess paintings and images, she was part of the support for Göbekli Tepe, and she had seen this image, and she worked with others to bring this image of Sheila out from underneath the shed, and now she is displayed. But it just kind of shows the prejudices of archaeologists, the prejudices of societies. against images which they don't feel are good enough or sweet enough, images of the feminine in her death aspect. On the right-hand side is another figurine that comes from Göbekli Tepe of the life-giving goddess. And these images of goddess that come through time after time, usually the breasts are prominent and the hands are placed in different places on the body to actually indicate where the nourishment is coming from. Sometimes they're on the belly, sometimes they're at the vulva, sometimes they're on the breasts. All over Anatolia there are settlement mounds which date from the Neolithic, and these mounds are layers and layers of life have been lived, and the buildings are built from mud, so they eventually crumble, and then as they crumble they build on top of them. So the bottom layers of these settle mounds come from the Neolithic, and the top comes, just 200 years ago. So when we were visiting here, we stayed in a Kurdish village called Yuvakali Koyu, and the house that we stayed in was on the side of this settlement mound, and in the just next to their entrance were these findings, which were, there's a piece of a goddess here, there's bones, there's there's pottery, which all comes from the Neolithic, which was just found by walking around the bottom of the mound. And in the lower picture, you can see the West Mound from Çatalhöyük, showing what they probably looked like. And they were villages that had no spaces between the buildings. So you entered the building by going in through the roof. And as you look at this image, you can see that inside each building there are sacred objects and sacred images, both on the walls and on the floor. And in Çatalhöyük, they buried their dead beneath the bedding, the layers where they slept. And here is more of an image of what remains today, but you can still see, when you go there, you can still see the bucrania that were in the walls that held. So the bucrania were really significant. The bull horns, and also other images of a Sheila. In the lower image, you have here another image of a Sheila with her legs akimbo as the birth-giving goddess, and below the bucrania, and bucrania on the walls. This is a reconstruction in at Çatalhöyük of what one of these rooms looked like. And the dead are buried under these platforms. And in some places it's like 4 or 5 of the dead are buried there, and in others there are 20 buried. There are also wall paintings on the walls of the insides of the houses, and this one that you can see very slightly and has been enhanced here shows an eruption of the nearby volcano going off, which is an extraordinary thing, of Mount Hassan erupting in the distance, which occurred about 9,000 years ago. Once again, here in Çatalhöyük, there are handprints, more stylized here, but still here. And of course, here from 7000 BCE, Çatalhöyük, the mother goddess, is one of the most famous images of goddess. The mother goddess is displayed giving birth to a child, and she sits between 2 felines that may be lionesses, that may be tigers. It's not clear. But again, you can see that her breasts are exaggerated, her shoulders are exaggerated, her belly is exaggerated. She has a pubic triangle, she has big thighs. She is abundant, and between her legs you can see the baby. So these, and to some of these images, which you can see in the museum at Ankara, are enormous. Like they're this size. This figure is this size, and you can also get them this size, showing the importance and the love of Goddess, that as she was part of the temples that were built. And temples in those days, every home was a temple. So a temple was not somewhere separate from life, it was part of life. This is a goddess temple from the Cucuteni culture in Moldavia, which is also part of what is happening in Ukraine at the moment. This culture, when this was being excavated by Maria Gimbutas from 4,300 BCE, they found this model enclosure of a sacred sanctuary, and the figurines were found here on the top here, and this is a bread oven. So one of the facets of the Neolithic evolution came because of the ability to sow grain and take the grain and retrieve the flour, that allowed people to settle in places because they began to find food that could be gathered and collected. And also sitting on that platform at the end are these strange little figurines shown on the left here. These big thighs, again, big thighs, no arms. Sometimes the arms are like they're little like bird wings, breasts, heads that are very stylized but not human. And it's also like a council, a gathering of goddesses. Moving forwards to 4000 BCE, through this time span, we go to Halsafini, the Hypogeum in Malta. This is the resting place of 7,000 people. It's set on 3 levels, and the bones of the ancestors were laid out on different levels, with both a speaking chamber and an oracle hole. So when you go there, you can, as you make sound, sound becomes something that vibrates in these sacred temples. So whenever you were there, you were actually in communion with your ancestors. On the right-hand side is a really well-known image of the sleeping woman lying probably on what was a wooden bed, and the idea is that you would go into the Hypogeum and sleep in one of these alcoves around here on the lower level. There were alcoves where a person could sleep and dream and receive a dream from the ancestors. And the dream was of Goddess. Coming back to our own country and just down the road, you have the entrance to Stony Littleton Long Barrow near Bath from 3500 BCE. And the winter solstice sunrise illuminates the interior of this long barrow with liquid light. So as it rises, the very dark interior of Stony Littleton becomes illuminated with this golden light, which is extraordinary. It's an extraordinary light that is there for an hour or two and then moves on. So the entrance of light into the darkness, the fertilizer, where light was known to be important, light was known to bring life. So that life entering into the long barrow awakens and vibrates the memories of the ancestors. Also, long barrows were places, as well as being places where the bones of the dead were laid, they were also places of conception, because the idea that you went back into the earth, as in the Australian tradition, that when you die you go back into the earth and you go back in the place where you come from. At the same time as Stony Littleton, back in Malta, we have Hagar Kim, the temples there, and the temples are laid out as the body of Goddess, with her breasts, her hips, her belly. So you can come in here, you come in this entrance, come in here, there you are in her hips. You come in here, you are in her breasts. This is the main altar, this is where her head is. So her head is not so as significant as the spaces of her breasts and hips. And also these additions, everything is this emphasis on the spaciousness of the body of Goddess. And of course, many of these temples are aligned to the rising and the setting of the sun at significant times of the year, at the solstices and equinoxes, and also the rising of the moon. Here is the Tarxian temple in Malta, located not far from the Hypogeum. And again, you are entering into the body of the goddess. So to go into the temple is to enter her body, is to be, and these people knew what they were doing, because particularly on Malta, there are many, many of these temples that are, and they were not easy to make. They are made of large stones, and the stones are decorated in the symbols of Goddess, the spirals, the circles, all the symbols of life. Maria Gimbutas wrote a book called The Language of the Goddess, where she delineates all the different signs and images of Goddess that were used in the Neolithic time. At the same time, in 3500 BCE, we have the Gavrinis Passage grave tomb mound in the Gulf of Morbihan in Brittany. Again, in this, here you are entering in to the body of Goddess as you are returning into the ancestors, and the spirals, the circles, the symbols, everything, the life-giving energy, the snakes rising on the stones. It's an extraordinary place. If you get the chance, go there. Go early in the morning to miss the crowds. And then once again, in Gozo, you have the Manadra temples, again entering the body of the goddess, going in through here into her body, in through here into her body, and in through here into her body. And these, as you can see, these are aligned to the summer solstice, the winter solstice, and the equinox. This is particularly aligned to the equinox. And the sun enters and illuminates the main altar. And these temples overlook the sea. In these temples and in all the temples in Malta, you have oracle holes. So on the edges of the outside of the temples, there are narrow spaces where a priestess could go and stand and could speak through the hole. And the shapes of the oracle holes are such that they magnify the voice. So the voice of the oracle becomes really powerful to hear. And so the people who are listening would be on this side, and the priestess oracling is on the other side. And also there are altars to Goddess. In Brúnaboyne, in Ireland, 3200 BC, and you can see that over thousands of years, these within the same time spans in different countries, these monumental megalithic mounds, sacred spaces are being built to honor both the ancestors, but also to honor the great divine mother, she who is the source of all, she who is the life, she who can be represented in the triple spiral. Yeah. And this is the exterior of Bruneboyne. I like this picture on the right here of when it was first discovered. As you will probably know, the fascia of white stones that they added to the front of Bruneboyne was actually on the ground. So the reconstruction that they did is not how it looked. It was the earth which was covered in thousands of crystals. Also close to Bruneboyne is the ceremonial site of Knowth in the Boyne Valley from the same kind of time. And once again, Knowth is an extraordinary sacred site with many mounds, one large mound which is aligned to the equinox, and many smaller mounds around the edges. And again, the interior is that there are over 200 decorated stones carved and shaped, some with sun images. Here's the sun, and the spirals, and the megalithic shapes, and the curbstones around the mound are all carved and decorated. It's an extraordinary place. At the same time, in Avebury, the building, creation of Silbury Hill, the avenues, West Kennet Long Barrow, and the sacred spring, which is believed to be why everything began there, was because water flowed in the cycles of this, in annual cycles. It arose and disappeared, had a magical capacity to appear and disappear. And of course, much has been written about Avebury. My favorite is Michael Dames, who wrote of the Avebury cycle. It's a wonderful book, and in his understanding that a really gigantic image of goddess was laid out across many miles across the Avebury landscape, and the boundaries of that image were formed by long barrows, so from very early times. And also that the henge itself, with its two avenues, is a shape that is very like the womb and the ovaries in a human body. The stones themselves can be seen in many different ways, representing both divine forms and also human and animal forms. And over time, you see that in many different cultures, the people were understanding the same kinds of thing and expressing them in different ways. And here we are, jumping across continents to Crete, to the temple at Knossos, which again has many wonderful kind of attributes as a center of goddess spirituality. Here are perhaps the most iconic images of the goddess as Ariadne, as the snake goddess in both forms, and the Knossos itself is aligned to Mount Ida in the background. So most goddess sites, most goddess temples are not put haphazardly in the landscape. They have a relationship to the landscape around them, and that's usually two prominent hills, often hills that are breast-shaped or that are axe-shaped. So in Crete in particular, and the sacred axe became symbolic of the cycle of the moon and also of the mountains behind. And this position, this posture, which comes in many of the earliest of the images. So these are earlier than these. And it's something we do and to express our adoration for Goddess. These are some of the images that still remain at the Temple of Knossos in Crete. Glorious colors, so many expressions of the beauty of her nature, with lots of color and lots of imagery. And it's believed that these are the priestesses who appeared naked, with naked breasts, which is an evocation of the earlier images of Goddess where she was seen to be naked. Here in the throne room, when we first went there over 30 years ago, you could sit on that throne. I have sat on the throne, which is now bound up and closed. At 2000 BCE, we have the Temple of Festos, which again is, many temples are placed in the center of a circular plateau of some kind with mountains around the edges. So, and Festos is one such site, and it has, in the distance, we have the Horned Mountains beyond. And the Festos disc is the one that is that someone has just managed to decipher and is a praise song to Goddess. This is the site of the earliest temple to Demeter and Persephone at Eleusis, where the mysteries of Eleusis were performed. In those days, you could climb down into where the temple actually was, which was originally a very small rectangular building. And then gradually over hundreds and thousands of years, everything grew and became bigger and bigger. This is the entrance to the main temple, or the ruins of the entrance to the main temple, to Demeter and Persephone, which began around 650 BCE with the cave entrance in the hill beyond. When we first went there, that's the first time that I realized that all myths are based in landscape, and that they all have a place where the myth begins. They have a physical home. This cave here, this cave which is partially collapsed, this one here is the cave where Persephone descended into the underworld. Before then, I hadn't really understood that. Everything has its place. As part of the mysteries of Eleusis, there was an overnight walk of many miles from Athens to Eleusis. And these niches in the wall are the places where statues of Aphrodite were in the niches in the wall, and those who were walking on the pilgrimage would offer their salutations and blessings to her as they walked to Eleusis. This is actually Delphi, the temple of the Oracle of Gay on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, which date from 1400 BCE. The Castalian Spring has a temple on the right-hand side of this wooded area. The spring comes forth, and the priestesses who were the oracles of the Pythia would go here to bathe. This is the temple of Philae, the temple at Philae in Egypt, the Isis temple, which began 690 BCE. 600 BCE, the temple of Artemis Brauronia. This is the first Greek temple, and what's really lovely here is that the pillars of the temple are very small. So before the Greeks really got into building temples of pillars, huge pillars, and before the Romans got into building even huger temples with pillars, there was this little temple with pillars that are just about 10 or 12 feet high. It's very pretty. On Naxos, you have 530 BCE, the Temple of Demeter, Sangri, and beyond, once again, you can see in the background, there's a pair of paps here, and if you walk up through in this place here, there's a cave halfway up this hillside, which has a perfect view of where the temple is. It's a beautiful place. 570 BCE, the Temple of Athena, Pronoia, Parthenon, on the Acropolis, was built on the site of an earlier Athena temple. The temple is there now, huge. But also what it was interesting is that on the top of the Acropolis, there were over 50 images of these beautiful Korai, and the Korai is the maiden goddess. Back at Delphi, the same time, the circular temple, the temple of Athena, Pronoia, Athena of Foresight. This is her earliest cult temple from the 7th century BCE, where the site was dedicated to Gaia. Founded by the Amazons, 600 BC, this is a model of the third temple of Artemis of Ephesus. And she is the many-breasted mother. She is the one who gives life, who brings life, who nurtures life, who feeds everything. 200 BCE, at the foot of Mount Olympus, lie the ruins of Dion with the sanctuaries to Isis and Demeter. It was when we were here, my husband and I were there visiting, and I had a complete breakdown because here we'd been to many sacred sites, and here we were at another one, which again was in ruins. And it was here that I made a vow over 20 years ago that when I returned home to Glastonbury, I would build a living goddess temple instead of every temple that we went to was in ruins. We would bring goddess alive again. Same kind of time, 200 BCE, this is Coventina's well and temple in Northumbria. And in the museum there you can see all these really great images of Coventina. She has a spring up here. It's very high and very wild, and she's the goddess of the waters. Another goddess of the waters, the temple of Sulis Minerva at Bath, which dates from the 1st century of the CE, the Common Era, which we can still visit today. Also at that time, the Roman temple and Nymphaeum dedicated to Hafren, Sabrina at Little Dean, Gloucestershire, was built on a much earlier Neolithic site beside sacred springs above the River Severn. So this is the view from the site of the temple up here, looking down at the curve of the River Severn. And these are various images of Sabrina. And the sea to the west of us is known in earlier times as the Sabrinian Sea. This is the reconstructed Neolithia temple from Holland from the 2nd century CE with myself and Sandra, Emma Rose, and the rediscovered Roman altars to Neolithia. Neolithia has similar characteristics to the goddess of these lands. She is a goddess of the margins of the earth and the water. And she is usually pictured seated, often holding apples in her lap, and she has a dog with her. And maybe 20 or 30 years ago, the sands around the margins of Holland began to shift with the storms, and these altars began to emerge from beneath the sand. So they now have about 40 or 50 of these altars that were sacred in those times. And this is the inside of the reconstructed temple. with the modern-day image of Nehelenia. I wanted to include this Christian goddess temple, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, which is it's inspired by nature. It's inspired by the beauty of her nature, constructed, of course, by Gaudi and not yet finished. In the inside, the pillars are trees. All the forms that you see are the forms of trees and of plants and the forms of her nature. Extraordinary beauty, spirals, again, harking back to the earlier Neolithic images, the Paleolithic images of spirals and circles, and amazing images of nature. One of the first modern-day goddess temples was begun in 1993 and initiated by an amazing woman called Genevieve Vaughan, who wrote The Gift Economy, which is a great book to read about the understanding of how Goddess gifts to us everything that we have, how mothers gift to their children, how we receive that gift without true acknowledgement. So this Sekhmet temple is built in Nevada near to Las Vegas, and it is on the edge of a bombing range. Something like 40,000 square miles of bombing range. So it's this potent temple in this particular spot. Genevieve made a vow to Sekhmet when she was visiting Sekhmet's temple in Egypt, that if Sekhmet would grace her with children, she would build her a temple. And this is the temple she built with her children. This is out in the desert. It's in a kind of oasis in the desert. It's a beautiful space that holds the presence of Goddess from the landscape. And then we come to where we live, to Glastonbury, to Avalon, which, as you can see, is a hill arising in the center of a plain with the surrounding hills on three sides. 20 years ago, in 2002, the Glastonbury Goddess Temple was opened to the public, and in 2003, it was formally registered as an indigenous British goddess temple. It's dedicated to the goddesses of this land that we are reclaiming and getting to know again by looking at how she appears in nature and through the cycles of the seasons of the year. These are some of the decorations that are within the temple. For us, the temple is dedicated to the Lady of Avalon, she who is goddess of this sacred land, and we see her forms in the landscape all around us. Sorry. At the same time as we were creating the temple here, Ava Parks was creating the Orange County Goddess Temple, and these are some of her explorations. In 2007, we bought the Goddess Hall, which is next to St. Ben's Church in Glastonbury. And the decoration of the hall is a wall painting by Jonathan Minshall, whose paintings you can see now all over Glastonbury. But this was maybe the second one he did in the town. And as you can see, we love images. We love things that express how we feel about Goddess, both from the ancient times and to the modern day. Another temple that has been built is Amalia Peck's Goddess Studio in Escondido in 2007. This is the Nehelenia Temple, the Dutch Goddess Temple, also 2007. The initiation of the Goddess Temple here and the initiation of the Priestess of Avalon training in Glastonbury allowed people mostly women, to actually begin to express how we feel about Goddess, how we love her, how we adore her. And many of the people who have taken our training go back to where they come from, and they create temples there. Hungarian goddess temple. Here there are the Swedish goddess temple, Freya's temple, 3 different temples in Sweden, and the Madrid goddess temple in Spain. Lots of temples. And the goddess temple of Ashland in Oregon, created by Grael Corsini, which is a kind of outdoor temple with lots of sacred spaces. The Stockholm goddess temple. In 2007, we opened Goddess Temple Gifts under the inspiration of Sue Quatermass, priestess artist. And shops can be temple spaces too. And this is our own Goddess Temple gift shop, which is full of images and artifacts of Goddess. In October 2014, we were registered as a place of worship for legal weddings, and Mike and I were the first people to get legally married in a goddess temple by a priestess. It was great. And again, these are many other modern day goddess temples: Sheffield, Vienna, Bristol, Turin, Rome, and Melbourne, Australia. So Goddess is coming back, and she's coming back into the lives and hearts of many people. In 2016, we bought Goddess House as a healing temple and a goddess educational center, taking on both the past and the present. And these are some of the people who are involved in the present-day running of the Goddess Temple. You can find information about our work at goddesstemple.co.uk, goddesstempleteachings.co.uk, goddesshouse.co.uk, goddesstemplegifts.co.uk. So there are many ways in which we have been influenced and inspired by the early goddess temples. We see ourselves as being a continuation of something that began many hundreds of thousands of years ago. We are not just existing in a vacuum. We have not begun from nothing. We have begun from a long and honoring past that understood Goddess to be the source of all life on this planet and the source of all life in the universe. Whether you believe in this or not, you cannot but look at all these ancient images and ways in which the peoples of those much earlier times and over hundreds of thousands of years, how they felt about their place in the universe. I thank you for your attention.